Story 1. Saving the Mermaid. Paris, France. This is the story of a girl named Lucy and her little brother Jonathan, two children who lived in a village by the sea. Their parents were bakers who had a small bakery on the main street of the village. Lucy and Jonathan would go to the bakery after school and help their parents by doing chores. In return, they would get treats like delicious scones, cakes, and tarts. They also liked to play with their friends on the beach. But little did they know that they were soon going to change from being regular children to becoming adventurers. It all started one Saturday morning during their summer vacation when a little bunny hopped into their bedroom. They could tell this was no ordinary bunny because it hopped up to them and then, with its little bunny hands, pointed to the door. They knew the bunny was asking them to follow him. They ran out and followed the bunny into the forest. They ran and ran for a long time before the bunny stopped by a big tree. It was the largest tree they had ever seen. Lucy and Jonathan sat down under the tree as they were exhausted. As they leaned against the tree, they heard a voice. "Can you please not lean on me? It tickles." They looked around, confused. There was no one there. Even the bunny had disappeared. Then they heard the voice again. "I asked you to come here because I have chosen the two of you to go on an adventure." They thought they must be dreaming. Could the tree be talking to them? They turned around, and sure enough, they could see an outline of a face on the tree. "There is a girl in a land far away who needs your help. Are you willing to help her?" said the tree. "What does she need?" asked Lucy. "She is a mermaid stuck on land and she needs to get back to the ocean," replied the tree. Once Lucy and Jonathan agreed to help out, the tree asked them to pull one of its branches, and lo and behold, a secret door opened up in the tree. They scrambled inside and the door closed behind them. There was a table with a backpack on it. "This is your adventure kit," said the tree. "There is no time to explain everything that is in the kit, but just remember one thing. When you are ready to come home, twist the golden egg that is in there and it will bring you back home." With that, the tree asked Lucy and Jonathan to close their eyes to begin their adventure. When they opened their eyes, they were outdoors and under a tall tower. They had no idea where they were, but it surely was not their small village. They started walking, and when they looked back, they were able to see what the tower was. "It's the Eiffel Tower!" exclaimed Jonathan. "We are in Paris, France," he said. Lucy and Jonathan realized that to find the mermaid, they needed a plan. So they found a park bench under the Eiffel Tower and opened up their adventure kit. The first thing they found was a packet containing money, but it looked different from the money they had at home. "These are euros," said Lucy. "This is the money they use in France. We can use this to buy ourselves lunch. Let's find a cafe where we can eat. Paris is famous for its cafes. We can sit outside and plan our adventure. They took one last look at the beautiful Eiffel Tower and went to find a cafe. They found a perfect Parisian cafe with green and white awnings and tables with umbrellas on them. It was on a busy street corner. There were several people at the tables eating lunch, having a coffee, and enjoying the weather. Lucy spotted an empty table in the corner and rushed and sat down. Very soon, a waiter appeared, and Lucy greeted him with a warm bonjour. Jonathan turned in surprise. "I did not know you speak French," he whispered. "Only a few words I learnt in school. Bonjour means hello," replied Lucy. "Ah, you are tourists," said the waiter, who had been standing waiting to take their order. "How do you like Paris?" "We are not tourists," blurted out Jonathan. "We are here to rescue a mermaid and take her back to the ocean." The waiter looked confused and started backing away. Lucy blushed, and Jonathan looked on proudly. "You cannot say that, as people will think you are crazy. Nobody believes in mermaids," whispered Lucy. She tried to change the topic with the waiter by asking for the menu. They decided to get a baguette sandwich and a chocolate croissant each, and while eating, opened their backpack. The first thing they saw was a note from the magic tree. In it were instructions on how they could find the mermaid. They learned that she had purple hair with a yellow streak going from top to bottom. If they found her, they were to tell her the magic tree sent them to take her to the ocean. They also needed to tell her the password, which was fishy. Lastly, the note had instructions on possible places she could be at. These were the Arc de Triomphe and the Louvre. They finished their lunch, which was delicious. Jonathan wanted to have another dessert of chocolate cake, but Lucy said no, as they needed to get going. They first set off for the Louvre. The waiter had told them how to get there. It was a 45-minute walk, but a beautiful one, along the banks of the River Seine that runs through Paris. Along the way, Lucy continued reading the note from the magic tree. It gave them some more information on the Louvre Museum. "Did you know that the Louvre is the largest art museum in the world?" said Lucy. "If you were to spend 30 seconds on every art piece in the museum, it would take you 100 days to see it all. It's amazing." Lucy stopped walking for a second to catch her breath. She then continued, "Luckily, the magic tree has written that we should only go to the most famous painting in the Louvre and look for the mermaid there." They continued walking. "How do we know which is the most famous painting in the Louvre?" asked Jonathan. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out once we get there," replied Lucy. 45 minutes later, they were at the entrance of the museum. They bought tickets at the counter and went in. Lucy asked the lady who was checking tickets at the door about the Louvre's most famous painting. "It's the Mona Lisa, of course," she replied, pointing them in the right direction. They walked for quite a distance, passing priceless works of art, until they came to a crowd around a small painting. The sign said that was the Mona Lisa. It's quite small for such a famous painting, said Jonathan. But looking at it closer, they were mesmerized by how beautiful it was. They heard a guide describe how it was painted over 500 years ago by Leonardo da Vinci. Just then, they saw a girl with purple hair and a yellow streak walk out of the room. "There she is!" exclaimed Jonathan. They ran after her and tried to get her attention. There she was again, heading towards the exit. When they were catching up with her, a big group of tourists blocked their path. They all were busy taking pictures and not looking where they were walking, and so Lucy and Jonathan had to weave in and out of their way. They finally made it to the exit and ran outside, but the mermaid was nowhere to be seen. They had lost sight of her. They ran up and down the road frantically but could not find her. "Oh well," said Jonathan, "at least we tried. Let's get some chocolate cake and head out of here." Lucy looked at him incredulously. "Are you just going to give up that easily and not help a mermaid go home? No, we're going to find her no matter how long it takes." Jonathan looked at her sheepishly. I know. But you need to promise me that I will get a piece of chocolate cake before we leave." Lucy didn't answer because she was already walking ahead to a policewoman standing on the street corner. "Excusez-moi," she said. Jonathan looked on in admiration. "How do you know so much?" he said, marveling at his sister's command of the French language. The policewoman looked on in amusement as Lucy gave Jonathan a stern look and replied, "I told you I only know a few words." "Could you please tell us how we can get to the Arc de Triomphe?" asked Lucy. The policewoman was very kind and gave them detailed directions on how they can get to the nearest subway station and the stop they need to get off at. They found the station easily, bought tickets, and continued reading the note from the magic tree while they were on the train. It says here that Napoleon ordered the building of the Arc de Triomphe to honor the soldiers who fought in the wars with the French army. "It is over 200 years old," read Lucy. They got out of the subway station and immediately saw the Arc. Even though they hadn't seen it before, they could recognize it immediately. There were not too many people there, so they hoped to find the mermaid easily. And sure enough, there she was, sitting under the arch. As she saw them approach, she got up and started walking away. "The magic tree sent us to help you get back home," shouted Lucy. The mermaid looked at them suspiciously, but kept on walking. Luckily, Jonathan remembered the password. "Fishy!" he shouted. That worked. She turned around and smiled and walked towards them. "Are you going to help me?" she asked. "Yes, we are," said Lucy. "We've come a long distance to help you get to the ocean and become a mermaid again." They caught up with her and she immediately hugged both of them. She told them her story. She came from a land under the water where she lived with other mermaids. 1 week a year, mermaids could become humans for 3 days, and she used that opportunity to come out of the water and explore Paris. She was with a few friends, but unfortunately, she was not paying attention and got separated from them. Now she wasn't able to find her way back to the ocean. "When do the 3 days get over?" Lucy asked. "Tomorrow at noon," she replied. "I don't have any money and don't know how to get back to the water. And the worst part is that if I'm not back in the water by noon tomorrow, I will be stuck on land until this time next year." They knew they had to act fast. Paris was not near the ocean, and so they had to take a train. Lucy spotted a tourist office nearby, and they walked there and asked the lady behind the counter how they could get to the ocean. She gave them details of a high-speed train that would take them there by the next day. They ran outside, hailed a taxi, and very soon made it to the train station. They bought tickets and soon were in a cozy cabin within the train. Once settled, they headed to the dining car on the train. Lucy counted the remaining money they had and decided they had more than enough for a nice dinner. Jonathan could even get the chocolate cake he wanted. They were silent at first, eating and enjoying looking out at the French countryside passing by. Once done, the three of them went back to their cabin to settle in for the night. Before going to bed, the mermaid introduced herself and told them about her life underwater. She lived in a house in the ocean with her father, mother, and 2 sisters. She even had a dolphin as a pet. They soon fell asleep as they were all exhausted and had a big day tomorrow. The next day, the train pulled into the station and they rushed out and ran to the taxi stand. They asked the driver to take them to the nearest beach. It was 11:45 a.m. and they only had 15 minutes left before it was noon. As the taxi started moving, they asked the driver how long it'll take. 30 minutes, he said. They were shocked. It meant that the mermaid would be stuck on land for another year and would not be able to see her family. They asked the driver to go as fast as he could while they sat in silence, dejectedly looking out of the window. Suddenly, Jonathan yelled, "I see water!" They checked their watch and had 10 minutes to spare. The driver looked back at them and said, "This is not a beach that has sand, it only has rocks." "We don't care. Stop the car," yelled Jonathan. They paid the driver and looked at the time. It was 11:57 a.m. They had 3 minutes left. They ran with the mermaid to the water. She stopped at the edge and said, "Thank you for saving me." And she then dove into the water. They saw her swim out into the ocean faster than they had seen anyone swim before. Then they saw her dive in. But when she dove in, they did not see legs, but a fin going under the water. They looked at their watch. It was exactly noon. They stood and stared out at the ocean for some time. And then Jonathan turned to Lucy and said, "I want to go home." Lucy nodded and silently reached into her backpack and pulled out the golden egg. Jonathan held on to her and she twisted the top of the egg and they both closed their eyes. When they opened it, they were back in their bedroom at home. They heard their mother call them. "Come down for breakfast. You don't want to waste your entire Saturday." They looked at each other confused. They had started their adventure on a Saturday and were gone for more than a day. That's when they realized that back at home, no time had passed. It was as if they never left. Could they have dreamt the whole thing? They looked at each other and then looked down at their feet. There was the backpack. It was not a dream. The end. Here are some fun facts on France. These fun facts can also be found at the bottom of the written version of the story. Did you know that Paris is the capital of France? It is located on the continent of Europe. Did you know that each of the colors on the French flag represent different things? Blue is for freedom, white for equality, and red for brotherhood. Did you know the Eiffel Tower was built as an entrance arch for the 1889 World's Fair? The tower was initially scheduled to be dismantled after 20 years. Luckily, it was discovered that it was a perfect place for a telegraph antenna, and so the tower remained. Did you know you need to climb 1,665 steps to reach the top of the Eiffel Tower? There is also an elevator to take you up. Did you know the legend of mermaids goes back over 3,000 years ago to a story from ancient Syria? In this story, a goddess named Atargatis wanted to become a fish. But when she dove into the water, only her bottom half was transformed. Did you know Paris is called the City of Lights? One of the reasons is because it was one of the first cities to use gas street lighting. Finally, did you know Parisian cafes have been a part of the city since the 17th century? The oldest cafe has been around since 1686. That's it for the story and fun facts. See you next week.